Now this morning, as we've been practicing thankfulness, we're going to dig into how does thankfulness lead to action? Because genuine gratitude leads to overflow. It overflows with generosity and acts of service around us. It's not just warm, fuzzy feelings, but it leads to action. And let's dig into this account that we've read for us this morning. The woman, the Pharisee, and Jesus. The passage starts out pretty plainly. The Pharisee invites Jesus. Jesus comes, reclines in his house at the table. It's quite a kind of, there's no details added. It's just, let's skip to the real things that actually happened during the meal. So let's think about this a little bit more to give you a bit of an idea of what is actually happening here. So, first century, there's a Pharisee in a village. It possibly is the same village where Jesus has come just from before. In the beginning of chapter 7, he goes to the village of Nain. He encounters a funeral procession coming out of the village, and he goes over and he raises the boy who had died back to life again. He is well known in the village already for something pretty incredible. However, as was custom in those days, when a visiting rabbi or teacher would pass through a village, it's a great honor to host them in your home. This Pharisee invites Jesus. Now, it's not a dinner like we would think. It's not a private event at his house. This is a public event for the whole village. It might have been the event of the season or even the year. A traveling rabbi, like Jesus, has come to eat with this Pharisee. Now, it wasn't just Jesus that was invited either. This was a public event for the whole village to come along to come and be a part and witness. So the way this would normally work in the first century is there would be a room in the house, probably the biggest room, the largest room, and in the middle of that would be perhaps a courtyard. It could be open air or it could be covered, just depends on the particular house. But they would sit in the middle and they would recline on seats. And around the outside, everyone was invited to come and listen and watch, because it wasn't just the meal. There was expected to be conversation afterwards. A little bit like listening to a podcast today. You would listen to a podcast and conversation about current events and topics, beliefs and practices. And this was expected to happen after dinner. So people would stand around to listen and to learn from the traveling rabbi. So lots of people surrounding this conversation in the middle. And everyone's invited. And then we have the woman who is there as well that we see in this story. This woman is described as living a sinful life. Now, this kind of implies that she was possibly a prostitute or engaged in some other similar activity. Now, I don't know about you, but I often find that I am led to judge this woman and think, well, that's something she chose to do. She lived a sinful life. We think that's her self-determining how she's going to live. But the reality actually in this culture in the first century Roman and Jewish world is probably just as equally likely that she was cast off by her husband, cast out onto the street with no way to support herself. There's no social security or welfare. So quite likely she is just trying to survive and doing the best she had. She could have also been an escaped slave. There were many, and they were just trying to survive as well. She'd be unmarriable and had no way to support herself. And so she probably turned to prostitution or selling her body just to survive, literally just to live. So it's likely that that's potentially her situation as well. There's a lot in that as you think about this. What is also apparent, she's called a person who's lived a sinful life. Now, everyone was invited to this event of the season except a few people. People who lived a sinful life are not invited to be in a Pharisee's home, a well-respected religious teacher. And so she wasn't invited there, nor was she wanted there either. The question is, why did she get here, I guess? That's a question I had as I was reading this. How did this woman arrive at this place? And why is she doing what she's doing? Well, I want you to just picture for a moment, Jesus is reclining at the table. Now, I just want to demonstrate to you what that looks like. So he's actually lying down on his left side, a little bit like this. And he's lying at a table that's a low table, not like a dining table you've got. His legs are outstretched behind him. So this woman has come, perhaps pushed herself through the crowd. She's standing or kneeling at Jesus' feet. And so she has actually quite easy access to his feet. They're out in front of him. The Pharisees lying the other side, the table's in the middle, and they're eating from it, and she has access to his feet. So that's kind of the scene that we have before us. A woman who's not invited, who's not welcomed, but she comes anyway. She comes up to Jesus, and she starts weeping at his feet. It's quite incredible in the middle of this scene. We see what she does there. She weeps at his feet, so much so that the tears wet his feet. She must have been doing that for quite a while, mustn't she? For the tears to come down enough for the feet to be wet. I wonder if she thinks in that moment, what am I going to do? I need to dry these feet. All I've got is my hair. She lets her hair down to dry Jesus' feet. Now, in that culture, a woman was always having her head covered, and to take out your hair was seen as part of an adult activity, an erotic maneuver by her to the people who are watching on. This was an intimate act reserved for the bedroom that she's doing. So why is she doing it here? That's a really good question. It's extravagant, it's controversial, what she's doing. Then she does something even more costly. She takes her alabaster jar of perfume and she breaks it over Jesus' feet, anointing his feet with the most expensive thing she probably had, perhaps the one piece of inheritance that she actually has on her, or has in total. This act that the woman performs, it's costly, it's controversial, and it's committed. It took a long time, maybe 10 minutes or more, where she's standing in the middle of everyone doing this in front of Jesus on his feet. It's interesting here that Luke wants us to understand what the Pharisee was thinking about the woman's act in verse 39. The Pharisee who had invited Jesus saw this and said to himself, if this man really were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. He would know that she is a sinner. I wonder if the writer here, Luke, is suggesting, by not using his name, that it wasn't just him thinking that. I think everyone perhaps in the room is thinking the same thing. Can you just imagine the horror, the gasps, the murmurs through the crowd? What is she doing? As they saw her take out her hair and do that to his feet, dry his feet. It wasn't something that was welcomed either. And I wonder if we're meant to gasp in horror too. What is she doing? Why is she doing that? That is not appropriate. It was controversial. It was committed. It was costly. It's here that the conversation continues. Perhaps after dinner, Jesus says, and he addresses Simon directly by name. This is where we learn of his name. Simon, I have something to tell you. Directly. And this is for everyone else in the room to listen on as well. And I think Jesus answers him directly because he's addressing what everyone is thinking except him. And he wants everyone to understand, I'm not thinking like that. I see what she's doing differently. And Jesus tells a parable about debts and forgiveness of the debts and gratitude to that. Now, I'm not going to go into depth in that because it seems pretty straightforward. One who is forgiven a small debt only has a small amount of love or a small amount of appreciation. Someone who's forgiven a large debt has a large appreciation or a larger appreciation. It kind of makes sense. But what Jesus is illustrating here to Simon is that this woman's actions seem so extravagant to be offensive. They actually reveal a heart of gratitude for Jesus. Perhaps she recognizes that he's forgiven her of a debt that she could not pay herself, an eternal debt. See, one thing that we haven't seen in this story yet is why this woman is here. Now, A little bit before in Luke chapter 7, Luke records that Jesus is accused of being a friend to sinners and tax collectors. And here we have a woman who is called a sinner. Perhaps she has actually encountered Jesus already in the village. Perhaps she's already seen his acceptance of her. And she comes with Jesus, perhaps, to this meal. And she's overcome with gratitude for the welcome and acceptance that she's given us, that Jesus has given her. And that overflows with this extravagant action that is so controversial. She does, in that moment, perhaps if she had it again, would she do the same thing? Well, I think if you've encountered Jesus in a radical way, what does it matter? How you respond. The fact is, I think she had encountered Jesus, and so she responds out of that. That challenges us, doesn't it? How do you respond to Jesus? Have you encountered Jesus in a way that demands a radical, controversial response, an extravagant overflow of the gratitude you have for him, for who Jesus is and what he has done for you? Jesus takes this a step further with Simon. And again, he reveals what he's seen in this woman and her actions. Not only does he point to this woman's heart and her gratitude, but he wants to contrast that with Simon and his heart and his inaction. Have a look at the screen there. So he turns to the woman, but he's talking to Simon, and he says, well, do you see this woman? You see, and of course he sees this one. I mean, that's a silly question. It's not silly, but he wants Jesus to see more than just the action. He wants Simon to see the heart behind the action. That's what I think he's getting at there. Because then he says, I came into your house and you didn't give me any water, yet she's given me her own tears. The water she had, an intimate act of weeping. You did not give me a welcome kiss, as was custom in that day. But this woman has not stopped kissing my feet. Over and over again, she is welcoming him. You did not give me oil for my head, yet she has taken the most expensive thing, oil and perfume, and anointed the least of me, my feet, that are dirty and dusty. See, here we see Simon's inaction contrasted with the woman's extravagant action. Because those things that Jesus mentioned, they were ingrained customs of the day. They weren't something that was just a nice thing. They were things that were expected and had been practiced in that land for maybe 1,000 years. They were not new. They were ways of showing someone honor and hospitality. Yet, Jesus has given none of those things. If you remember back at the start, Luke records that the Pharisee invited, Jesus accepts, he attends, he sits down. It's quite an interesting little start that now makes sense later on. Okay, Jesus wasn't given any of these things. And not only this, but Jesus is again pointing to the heart of the issue. You see, the Pharisees' heart wasn't grateful. It's actually self-seeking. I think he's using Jesus as a pawn to gain himself honor in the village. You know, I'm hosting a grand event for the whole village to turn to, but I'm using my position to let Jesus know he's down here. I'm actually the one that is honored. I'm not going to honor and welcome you. Yet, this woman did what the Pharisee didn't do. Honored and welcomed Jesus. As I mentioned, the woman's act was committed. It took time. It wasn't something that she just did on the spur of the moment. It was committed. It was controversial. It was extravagant. And it was costly. It cost a great amount, an inheritance, perhaps. A genuine act of thankfulness has the power to change a life. We might not know it at the time, but it certainly changes this woman's life. We see in verse 47 to 48 that Jesus says, therefore, because of what she's done, her sins are forgiven. That's interesting to think about that, isn't it? Her many sins have forgiven, as her great love has shown. But then he also says to her, your sins are forgiven. So which is it? Well, I think Jesus wants us to understand here the connection between gratitude and action. You can't separate the two. They're intertwined. She has encountered Jesus, so she comes to him and she weeps over thankfulness for doing something that no one had ever done for her, accepting and welcoming her. And yet, Jesus says your sins are forgiven because you recognize me and who I am. It's both and. What is in our heart overflows, but our actions also reveal what is in our heart. And I think Jesus wants Simon the Pharisee and all of us who can often be like Simon sometimes, can't we? Not welcoming Jesus or others like Jesus does, perhaps with inaction or ingratitude towards Jesus and towards others. Yet here we see genuine gratitude overflows in action. In fact, I would say gratitude isn't complete until it overflows with action, because grateful people become generous people. So we've been practicing and thinking about gratitude and thankfulness over the last few weeks to try and build our gratitude muscles. As we develop a culture and a habit of being thankful, it will overflow into acts of service, into acts of generosity towards others, because grateful people are generous people. A genuine act of gratitude also requires nothing in return, because we've already received everything. If you think about that woman, she wasn't after anything. She was in a place where she wasn't welcomed, where she wasn't invited. There was nothing to gain from what she did. Probably everything to lose in what she did. Yet her actions show she wasn't doing it to get anything. She had already received. And this was out of the overflow of what she had received from Jesus. Of course, there's different ways we can be generous. It doesn't always have to be extravagant and controversial. We can give with our time, with our talents, or with our treasure. Something to remember. We can give with our time. We've all been blessed with the same amount of time. Doesn't matter how busy we think we are, we're all given the same amount of time. We probably all know someone who, if we ask them a question, that will speak for 10 minutes without getting a single word in. That is a challenge for someone who's busy, isn't it? Maybe that's a challenge to see someone as Jesus sees them and ask them that question anyway. We've got opportunities to serve at Carol's coming up in a couple of weeks. The opportunities at the Connect Zone. Go over there and see where you can serve and dedicate some time to being generous. Of course, we can use our talents too, can't we? The things we have, the skills and abilities we have. Maybe it is words. Maybe it's some practical help of some way that we can offer someone. Our talents, the things you've been given, the things you're good at. And of course, our treasure. We probably all know what that is. Our treasure. We can be generous with our treasure because God's given everything to us already. There's a couple of things to give that I wanted to highlight this year when it comes to giving our treasure. One of those is our Baptist World Aid Better World gifts. This is a great way of being generous at Christmas. Instead of buying something someone doesn't need at Christmas time, get them a Better World gift. You can find the link in our midweek link email that goes out every fortnight, and you click on it, and then you can buy a chicken or a goat for someone in another country. You might never see the result of it, but it's going to bless someone. Sometimes you can order a little card to give to someone and say, "Hi, I've donated on your behalf this amount." It'll go to medical supplies, it'll go to fresh water for someone, it'll go to providing food in the form of chickens or goats. There's lots of different things, but I encourage you to check it out. Sometimes it gets not the right response though. We've been doing this in my family for a few years. And on Christmas Day, we used to pull together our funds and then go and choose some things to donate towards. I got an email from someone in my family last year saying, we want to go back to giving physical gifts. Now, that person probably had the gift of giving, and they love being able to spend time giving gifts. Unfortunately, I don't work like that. That's not my gift. And I did send a bit of an awkward email back, and I was like, actually, I feel strongly about giving towards others at Christmas that are less fortunate than us in Australia. And so I kind of said, well, we're going to continue doing these gifts for people, the Better World gifts. But I encourage you to think about how you might give with your treasure towards those that perhaps need it more than us. Another way to give would be investing in the future. Our internship fund is set up to provide training and resources for our internship program. And we've had some amazing interns this year. We had 6 of them, and they have been incredible. Of course, we don't give so that we have incredible interns here at church. We give because we want to invest in the future of our church, to see missionaries and pastors be developed for not just our church, but the global church. So if that's something you're passionate in, if investing in the future of the church, I encourage you to think and pray about how you would invest generously with our internship development fund. And of course, you can give using the 3 or the 4 ways that Kiralee pointed out to us earlier. You can give towards that with your treasure. So as we finish here, giving can be costly. Giving often requires commitment. Giving can be controversial. But as we've seen from this passage, when we encounter Jesus in a radical way, it's life-changing. And it overflows with generous action in our life. In fact, genuine gratitude isn't complete until it overflows with action. Unlike Simon, who was selfish, attention-seeking, self-promoting, we have the woman who isn't even given a name. Yet her example challenges us, doesn't it? It shows someone who's encountered Jesus in an incredible way, who just wants to give the one thing she had in recognition and in gratefulness to Jesus. And really, actually, welcomes Jesus, unlike how he should have been welcomed by Simon, the man who should have recognized Jesus. So genuine gratitude overflows with action. It's not just a warm, fuzzy feeling. Deep gratitude leads and overflows to action all around us with generosity and acts of service. Grateful people become generous people.